Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream. I can't believe it. I can't believe Jujutsu Kaisen's over. Been a couple of insane Jujutsu Kaisen weeks going on here with so many overreactions, I think. So I wanted to get on and just kind of chat generally about the series. Normally, I might bring the chapter up, but I'm not going to today just because there's been some copyright issues on the channel. So we'll just like have a open discussion and just be able to talk to everybody about it. Looks like we've already got a few comments in here that we can get started with. Um, Although some of these are at random times, but so I don't think they're all in here. But we got we can go over them just as a few people are hopping in. 7 out of 10, I think the king said it best. Love truly is at the most powerful of curses. Just look at the fan base. LOL. Yeah, I feel like I would rate it a little bit higher, and we can talk about that later. But I'm kind of thinking more to the 8.5 kind of range. Final chapter is amazing. Unfortunately, 4 chapters before it aren't. Yeah, I think that's going to be what's most interesting about the story is that uh, a lot of people don't like the final 5 chapters, but enjoy the final chapter. And like I'm inclined to agree, at least to an extent. Um, but I definitely think the final chapter is the best of the last 5, for sure. And then the part 2 discussion is gonna be big. If there was a part 2, it's fine. But the fact that so many things are left unsaid and ignored, the audience is left like, uh, what's the point of all this? Nothing changed in the end. I feel like that's not the case. Um, I certainly feel like things have changed, and I feel like, um, like Sukuna is completely different. So I feel like I do not agree with that. So yeah, if anyone who's in the chat, just kind of throw in uh, some kind of thinkings on how what were your thoughts on the end of Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'll just kind of start rambling about what I thought, and if y'all have any interesting takes, or if you haven't read the last chapter, you can read it real quick and then come hang out, and we'll just kind of discuss. I made my video earlier this week on the legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen, or I think I changed the name to why it's the defining shonen of this generation. So we can talk about that a little bit, and so I feel like I've really been thinking about the story in its entirety recently. So I've been really going over how all of it works together, doing a big reread of the story. Um, and so I kind of want to just like on my mind. So I want to discuss like why I think the ending isn't that bad. Even if the final 5 chapters weren't all 10 out of 10s, I just don't see I don't understand this like really, really harsh pushback that has come on it. But it was the same thing with Attack on Titan, where it was like, yeah, maybe a few things in the final chapter wasn't executed 100% great there. Um, but that ending has a lot of great ideas. And I think this ending also has a lot of great ideas. Um, so my kind of feeling on everything, and if you have any thoughts on the end, throw them in and we'll discuss them. Characters, endings you liked, you didn't like. We can kind of talk about it. Things you thought wrapped up really well, or threads that you thought like, why didn't they touch on this again? All fair game. I think the crux of like, um, why people are frustrated with the ending is how quickly the battle ended. Um, right? Like I think people just want more of this story. That's why there's such huge claims for a part 2. And I think it's actually more stems from just like I want more hype moments for all the characters that I love more than I feel like there's a ton of things that weren't necessarily touched on. At least that's how I feel about it. And upon rereading the ending a handful of times, everyone loves chapter 265, and rightfully so. Chapter 265 is fantastic, and that conversation with Yuji and Sukuna is so good. And I think the next chapter is also really good. In a kind of follow up, and that his moments with Megumi are really, really good there. And I'm surprised no one's kind of mentioning 266 in terms of Megumi's development, because he certainly has some in that moment and when Yuji's kind of overcome this kind of cog mentality and doesn't tell him he has to live, but says that like, I hope you do because you're my friend and everything is better when you're around. And, like, that totally speaks to the story's themes from the very beginning, with having, friends that, are with you to the end. And so I thought that was really great. Um, I don't necessarily love, the way Nobara was brought back. That's probably my biggest complaint with the ending. Uh, Hello, is it Mahir? Am I pronouncing that right? What's up? Good to see you. What did you think about the Jujutsu Kaisen ending? Do you love it, hate it? To quote Anthony Fantano, how would you rate it? Uh, but yeah, I think for me, Nobara is the biggest miss with how she's brought back. Like, I just wanted a little bit more moments from her. I do think her coming back fits into the story's ideas of death and rebirth. And, we see so many characters at different points uh coming back in and out of the narrative. And so I think that is a really, really good thing. Like, it doesn't bother me that she came back. I don't think it was too much of a plot device, but I do wish she had a little more going on when she comes back, whether it was foreshadowed a little bit more, even though Gege's so about these abrupt switches. But I feel like that is something that, like, I just didn't think hit the landing 1,000%. Like, I was a little frustrated with how that came about. Sukuno's part was great. Totally agree. I mean, Sukuna is, and I talked about this in my video, um, that I just released on the legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen. I liked how Sukuna ended his story, a great villain. I totally agree. I feel like it was interesting that we got a little bit more about his backstory, or just kind of his relationship with Urame. And the idea that he's going north and he went down a path that he's now going down something different again, and that, he chose this wrong path. Speaks really well to Yuji's conversation with him at the end of the fight, which also makes that moment really great. And I think Sukuno's this great villain of, he wasn't we didn't need, like, too much justification for why he was doing these things. And we got just enough. And the end of his story, and the fact that it brings Mahito back into it, I thought was really, really poignant. And I think most people think that was the best part, and it turns him into a phenomenal villain. And I think all of the screams and shouts that were coming when he dies pathetically, are just, we're missing the mark. And we're too hasty. And that's just a common theme that comes up when you're talking about manga that is releasing in a weekly schedule, where people have insane takes that you have no there's no waiting for the later context. And so when, you can't let an author cook, uh because we have to have these instant opinions, which is just, like, frustrating, but it's just how it is, right? And so I think that's a great example of it. Like, people were being like, "Hey, Sukuna's ending's terrible," and then this last chapter comes, and they're like, "Wait, Sukuna's ending was great." Um, so I actually disagree with this take that Gojo's writing got bad. Gojo's writing was great at first, but it got so bad. I actually think his ending is really, really good, and we could talk about. I'll talk about this in a second after this other comment. Um, but I think it's really interesting what he does with Gojo. Um, I think Jujutsu Kaisen is a very chaotic world where the dynamics between curses, humans, and sorcerers changes continuously. So the ending kind of suits the manga. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good take on it. Like, JJK and Gege's writing style is super chaotic. Things are changing all the time. And, the ending was never going to go exactly the way we thought it would. It just, people expected brutality and violence, I think, to win out. But I think if you've been following the story and really, understanding the purpose behind why Yuji's going through this suffering, I think that uh, definitely is, you can see how it leads to this moment. So I think that's a really good take. Then on Gojo for a second, I'm surprised there's been such a big backlash on his character. And, you throw in reasons why, if you were frustrated with his development or anything. And I'm thinking of making a video titled uh, Gojo Didn't Lose. Because I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of people are frustrated that, like, he was, became this fraud or whatever. And that was kind of like the meme going around when he died. But then, he's out of the story because he's dead. And then he comes back, throughout a few flashbacks, right? His interactions with Yuta when Yuta overtakes his body. But this idea of him going south to be who he is, I think, fully answers the question that Gato asked him at the end of Hidden Inventory, which is like, are you the strongest because of who you are, or does being the strongest make you Satoru Gojo? But I love this idea that Gojo wins the fight because he believed in other people. Like Sukuna's strength is all for himself. When you think about his planning and everything that he does, it's to leave people behind. And so it's the singular strength, right, that we imagine in a very power scaling sense. But Gojo's character has never been about that. He's always been about trying to lift up the next generation. He's always been about trying to raise people uh, to be alongside him. And obviously, no one would ever be strong enough to rival him, especially in the current, like, I don't think Yuta, Yuji, Geto, I think any of them would have ever been close to Sukuna or to Gojo. But it's this idea that because he invested in other people, all of them together win. So a lot of Gojo's time, and Sukuna talks about how like this generation's soft, but it's actually that Gojo is lifting up this generation, and that's how they win. And so in a way, Gojo wins because his philosophy wins. And because the whole argument of who's like directly stronger is totally a wash, because we see the lengths, like it's almost a win for Gojo in the fact that Sukuna delays himself like coming back for so long because he wants to get Megumi's body so he can have access to the Shinigami. And so because of that, it's like for me in Gojo's story, the fact that he goes toe to toe with him, he has fun while doing it. Like there is this kind of tragedy to his character of he is the strongest, and this is the only chance he's able to fully be against someone who's like an equal to him. But I think the fact that he wins out, and then him, reinforcing that in the last chapter, I thought his character got as good of an ending as you could expect. Obviously, I wish he was in the story for longer because I love him. But I think his death is important, and I think the next generation finishing off Sukuna is a win for him. Um, it might be wild, but my theory, the good Sukuna, like the new Sukuna who chose North, and the bad Sukuna with the last finger, is going to fight with the new Sukuna if there's a Jujutsu Kaisen Part 2. That'd be really interesting. I have definitely not thought about that. I did see there's a great. Do you guys follow Speedy on Twitter? He did a great little thread about the imagery of hands in the last handful of chapters. That's like Gege was kind of cooking. Like there's some bars going on in these last few chapters, for sure, I think, and that would be really interesting. So, do you all think there's a part two? I've always been of the line of thinking that there's not going to be a part two. That this story is very self-contained, but I do think because it's self-contained, like there is a lot of things, areas that would be really interesting to be explored. So I could definitely see Gege taking a couple year hiatus, hopefully getting his health right. I don't, I hear a lot of people say that he's not in the best health, and so I hope he is, and he should be taking care of himself above all else. But if he does want to make a part two, like it would be really interesting to see everyone older. But without Gojo, it would be tough, right? Because like Gojo is the character, and people are so frustrated with him not being in the story. In JJK Part 2, we might not follow Yuji, same as Hunter x Hunter. We left Gon after meeting his dad. Yeah, that would be interesting. Although I think Gon's going to come back in the story if Hunter x Hunter continues on long enough. I don't think Gon's done for sure. He's on the cover of volume 38, which is the funniest thing I've ever seen. And then like the inside of the cover's like, sorry, Gon's actually not in this volume at all, but I wanted to show off my boy. But that would be interesting to pivot focus from and stay more into the world, because I do think Gege is very interested in a lot of other characters. And so I would definitely be down for that. Is Sukuna still alive in the last finger? Like, honestly, I'm not sure, but I definitely, this was an issue with the leaks. Like, I didn't read it as the cycle continues in the same way that it happens in Attack on Titan, because Sukuna is fundamentally changed. So even if he's alive or not, like, I don't necessarily know if that's relevant. It's that he's a fundamentally different person because he lost. Um, And also how cool that is with reflecting hidden inventory. It is kind of this idea of unchecked strength, can kind of lead to uh, like it leads to Gojo having this really arrogant personality, and then he loses to Toji, and it totally changes the direction of his life. Um, and so I love that, and how loss affects us, and it goes for every character throughout. Like it gives purpose to the suffering, and it kind of gives, it's kind of, I think a lot of what this story plays off of is this idea of um, trauma and dealing with trauma, and how the story that when the story that you're telling about yourself is fundamentally changed, that's trauma, and then we change with it, but we usually or hopefully can change for the better, and that these most difficult moments don't have to define us. And it's really interesting that, like, for Gojo, it's when he fundamentally loses that he changes, and it's the same for Sukuna, and it happens to Yuji continuously throughout the series and to other characters. Um, and so I really, really like that. Because in the first episode, they said Sukuna is not dead until every finger is gone. Then I think there's a good chance he is still alive. Um, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that much, but I think there is, if there's a part two, um, he could be involved for sure. It could be kind of like a weird Aizen thing, and like Aizen like randomly comes back in Bleach, and you're like, You should be dead. Like you shouldn't be like in prison or whatever." But if a part two happens, I mean, I'm definitely be there. I'd definitely be excited for it. And I think something that would be, I mean, I'm definitely down to follow Yuji and the trio again. Um, What's my fave anime? It's a great question. My favorite is actually Full Metal Alchemist. I know, basic. Uh, if I had to give a top like five, it would be, if we're just talking strictly anime, so I wouldn't include One Piece, because One Piece is, I'm more of a manga there. Like I've seen a lot of the anime, but I wouldn't consider it in the top. So just anime, I'd take both Full Metals, 03, Brotherhood, Attack on Titan's up there, Haikyuu's up there, of course. And then I'm missing Hunter x Hunter, kind of those five, and then like Bebop, Evangelion, Vinland Saga, are kind of all right in that ballpark as well. My fave's Attack on Titan. Yeah, it's a banger. Attack on Titan's so good. Jujutsu Kaisen, I feel like actually has a chance. I don't think it would be a top 10 for me, but it does have a chance to be like one of my favorite battle shonen. It certainly is manga wise, and when we're talking anime, I think that if the anime's production's as good as the Shibuya Instant hidden inventory for the Shinjuku Showdown and Colon games, like it's gonna be so good. It's gonna break the anime community so many times over. And so I definitely think it could like rise up on my list. Having I do want to fill out a list because I would love to like talk all my favorites on stream. I feel like that'd be really fun. But so that's kind of the ballpark. But yeah, Full Metal is like always going to be my favorite. Nostalgia wise, and every time I rewatch it, I feel like I find more depth. Um, Finally, I put a face to the person that makes best videos about Haikyuu. Hey, thank you so much. Yep, the face. Here it is. Yeah, I've been streaming a little bit. I used to like do a lot more talking head content, like because I've been making videos for like over 6 years. My first video was on Tyler the Creator, which is insane. Like I wasn't just an anime channel when I started. So I used to put my face on, and then I was just like, I really like the video essay format, so I stopped doing that. So yeah, here I am. Pretty fun. Uh, I'm not sure. Power scaling in Jujutsu Kaisen, I do feel like I'm a little underqualified. I think Hollow Purple's cooler, so there's that. Uh, Hello, what other manga have you been keeping up with aside from Jujutsu Kaisen? Kagurabachi, definitely been following that. I my kind of Shonen Jump cycle is I'll catch up to one series, and then I'll fall behind, and then I'll have a chunk of chapters I can catch up with another. But within a 10 chapter range, I'm pretty close with Kagurabachi, One Piece. I'm trying to think of what the other I'm rereading Hunter x Hunter right now to be caught up for it. I might make a video. I'm trying to make a video, non-spoilers on the Succession War and like why people should read it and like try to get into like why it's so good. So I've been rereading that. Huge Blue Box fan. And I'm a little behind on it because I've been waiting to read it. My voice is going for the anime that comes out. And yeah, by the way, October is stacked. So good. I can't wait to watch the episode of Uzumaki. And then actually, I think later this week I might stream talking about doing like a Gigok type stream where I look at all of the new shows coming out, and I probably won't watch the trailers, but we can maybe just discuss them to see, because I like to do the thing where I try to watch an episode or two of a lot of them if they're interesting and then continue on with it. And so yeah, that would be for sure something that I feel like it'd be a really fun stream. I don't know, would you guys have fun watching that? Trying to think of what else I've been reading. I've actually been reading a lot of books recently, not as much manga, because I'm going to Dragonsteel, if you guys know what that is, if there's any Brandon Sanderson fans. And so I'm trying to catch up to the Cosmere, and I've got like 4 books left and not enough time to read it. So I've been reading one of the secret projects, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, which is so anime inspired. It's really good so far. So yeah, if there's any Sanderson fans, shout out. Will you make vids about COTE in the near future? I don't know why my mind's going blank, but what does COTE stand for? And I don't know why I can't. I feel like I should know. I feel like I should know what this acronym is. Hollow Purple focuses on one point and Furnace makes massive disaster. Yeah, I feel like my inclination is that Hollow Purple, I might have said Hollow Point. Hollow Purple is stronger, but I don't know. I feel like I don't. That's the one part of Jujutsu Kaisen's story that like I haven't gotten into. Classroom of the Elite. I've actually never seen Classroom of the Elite, but maybe I'll throw it on my list to check out. I've heard really good things. Do you have like a pitch for the series for me to try to get me going on it? But we can also talk a little more Jujutsu. So yeah, I liked the ending of Sukuna. I liked the ending of Gojo. I think Megumi and Nobara, I think the criticisms of them are fair. Do I need an editor? So far, I edit actually everything on my own. I feel like eventually I will want an editor. So you can always reach out if you're interested, to my business email. Because I feel like down the road, I maybe want an editor on shorts, because those edits are pretty straightforward, but like kind of time consuming. But I mean, down the road, potentially. Maki has to be my favorite character. Maki Supremacy, definitely top 4 for me. I think because a lot of people were posting their top 4 and I didn't think about it enough to specifically choose. But I lean Maki. I think Maki and Yuta, I love them. I love the cover of them hanging out. So good. Them smiling together. It's everything. I love them. Gojo. Yuji's probably my 4th. And then maybe the 5th, or a close 5th, would be I'm forgetting his name. Higurama, is that how you pronounce it? Mr. Executioner. His name is so close. Hopefully you guys watched my Hoshiumi video that came out. And I didn't even realize it, but his name is so close to Hirugami, or like, just like similar enough, the middle blocker for Kamo Medai, that when I was recording that video, like I mispronounced his name like 5 times and like didn't realize it until, like not only like a normal mispronouncing, because like I'm so mediocre at getting Japanese inflection right, but like totally wrong. Like I was throwing letters in there that just do not exist. So but I finally re-recorded it. Like I caught it. I had already like uploaded it to Patreon, and then I was like, wait, I'm pronouncing this way wrong. So that was kind of funny, but I think that's how you pronounce it. He's an S tier character for Jujutsu Kaisen. Have you ever thought about making Blue Lock content? I actually have made a couple of Blue Lock videos. I have a video on the U20 All in Japan uh, match. I think it's called like why it's anime's most insane sports game or something like that. The video did okay. It's got like 11, 12,000 views or something. I have another video on why Blue Lock is misunderstood. That's like an anime specific one. And that one didn't do great views. It's like 4,000 or something. Then I also made one on Nagi for when the movie released. It's like how to find purpose in life, Sashiro Nagi. So those are three that I've made for like when the movie came out, and I really wanted to make one on the match. I definitely plan to make a video or two. I'd really like to make one about Rin and the Itoshi brothers. Like, I think their dynamic's so interesting. So maybe I will for season 2 when it comes out. I'm not. So I've only actually read through the U20 match, mainly because I like read through it and then I just like got busy again. But I heard the last couple chapters are insane. I don't know. I saw lessons from anime talking about it, and shout out to the goat. But I've heard it's super good and I really want to read it. So yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes because I know it gets like pretty insane. I mean, it's always insane. It's a great story. But in terms of Jujutsu Kaisen, I think those are probably my top 5 characters. Nobara, I still think is a good character, even though I didn't love the execution of her return, but I don't hate the idea behind it at all. And I still think Megami's a decent character. I think he gets some good development in chapter 266 that some people aren't like talking about enough. But I definitely don't think I think he could have been improved upon a little bit for sure. And so, but my other kind of thoughts on the ending, I didn't hate chapter 269 as much as everyone did. But it also wasn't the most impactful thing I've ever seen. Like I don't think it was ruining the story at all, but it wasn't like a big bonus for the story, if that kind of makes sense. What do you think of My Hero Academia? I think it's good. I think it's okay. I got really into it when everyone got really into it. I think it really blew up around season 3, and that's when I caught up to it. I think was halfway through season 3 airing. Season 1 and 2 are really nostalgic for me now, because that was so long ago that I watched it. I got like burnt out on it because I watched it and I like rewatched it like 2 times. I was showing everyone I knew. I was like, it was really, I think for me and for a handful of people who grew up in that generation before, it was the first time that I'd felt like feelings of Naruto and feelings of early One Piece and Bleach for a long time, because I just had kind of fallen off Shonen Jump the train a little bit. And with the updated pacing and decent animation, I was really really into it. And so, but I definitely fell off the train hard. I've actually stopped after season. I actually started rewatching it. I think I'm only in like season 5 though. The arc with Gentleman really kind of ended my hype for it. And so I think, like, compared to Jujutsu Kaisen, I don't think it holds weight to it. Like, I think it really struggles, My Hero. Like, I think it gets more mediocre as it goes on, but I do want to finish it one day. So I eventually, like, when the anime is getting close to being done, I'm slowly working my way up. But I just think a lot of the characters are really weak. And I don't love, yeah, I mean, I think it starts with character as the biggest thing that makes My Hero weak, especially in comparison to Jujutsu Kaisen. Mad Buck, good to see you. Yeah, I saw you left a comment early. So shout out to you for joining hopping in early and putting stuff in. It's always nice when there's some comments like right when I'm starting. What has changed in JJK in general is what I mean. The life of the sorcerers and the clans are still the same. They spent much of the time on Sukuna, then 2 chapters later they were like, okay, bye now. Yeah, I mean, I guess like a little bit. I do think for me what's changed is, so obviously Sukuna has changed, and I think the clans, I think that's a lot of what 269 was kind of about, is that the clans have had a falling out, and that he didn't fully explore it maybe as much as he could have. Like, I do see where this criticism is coming from, but I do think it is implying that some of the hierarchy is changing. Not that it's going to totally flip over and to become a utopian sorcerer society, but that a little bit of it is changing. And so that's kind of how I was interpreting the ending. But I mean, it's true. It did get rushed a little bit. This ending, like I think most people would have preferred at least 10 more chapters instead of 5 from when it was initially announced. But I do think there is a tangible enough ending that if we don't get a part 2, I don't think it lowers my score for it. I'm still thinking about an 8.5 out of 10, and I could see the anime being a 9 if the animation continues to be stellar. Um, have you read Berserk? I have, but I'm not all of it. I've read like the arc past Golden Age. And I like Berserk, but I don't connect with it quite in the same way that everyone else does. And that's going to sound too harsh. Like it's a masterpiece. Like I totally get why people consider it the greatest manga of all time. It's phenomenal. The Golden Age arc is phenomenal and I love it, but it wasn't quite top 1 for me. There's few things with Mira's storytelling that like I didn't vibe with as much. And actually it probably is my least favorite of like the uh typical popular seinen with Vinland and Vagabond, with arguably Vagabond being my favorite of the 3. Is Gojo gonna die if he gets hit by Furnace when he's in Sukuna's domain and when he is burnout? You know, I'm unsure. You're hitting me with a lot of these power scaling and like ability questions that like I'm more dialed into the themes of the story. I feel like versus like the power system and of everything. And but I would imagine close to death would be my guess. But if there's any more well-read power scalers in the chat, let us know if it would he die if that happened. But speaking of that fight, like I do think that's an all-time, and I said it in the video that I released this week. I think it's an all-time fight. Gojo versus Sukuna, one of the best shonen battles I've ever read. So hype, interesting thematically, didn't go on for way too long. Good pacing with it, and I do think I think let me know how you would rank arcs. And this isn't a super long story, so it's kind of like you've got your 3 big arcs and then you've got a lot of smaller arcs before that. With a couple of small within. I think Shinjuku Showdown might be the best arc in the show. It could be I think it's that or Shibuya, with the calling game as like a strong third. But for me, I feel like I lean Shinjuku Showdown, and I said it in my video something along the lines of like everything that Jujutsu Kaisen is the Shinjuku Showdown, and because it feels like it's going to be everything that Gege was building to was this big battle. It doesn't have quite the anything could happen in any moment feeling that I think Shibuya really nails, and I don't necessarily know if it hits the kind of moral depth that the calling games hits, but I think it has kind of a good balance of both with a very good climax, even if the last couple of chapters didn't knock it out of the park for everyone. But like chapter 265, so good. All the Yuta stuff I love. And then of course everything with Gojo. And the Kenjiku fight is so underrated. Like that fight is so good and so unique. Like and so yeah, I definitely lean Shinjuku Showdown as my personal favorite. Do you think Jujutsu Kaisen is going to steal most of the anime awards whenever it's going to air? Well, I think it already didn't it? Because I don't know if it counts for this next year, because didn't it win a bunch of awards last time? If not, then I think it probably will. But I feel like it already was actually in last year's, because it had just like finished airing. But I could be wrong. Comparing My Hero characters to JJK, multiple My Hero characters clear, the villains clear. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since you aren't caught up. Yeah, I mean, maybe it gets better down the road. Like I am only through 5 seasons, but Um, and I know, My Hero is also 100 chapters longer, but My Hero is just like not doesn't quite hit for me. Like I much prefer Yuji over Midoriya. Um, Bakugo is better than Megumi if we're kind of comparing there. Bakugo is a phenomenal character. I think Gojo is way better than All Might though, and All Might's good. Like, I don't want to hate on My Hero too much. Like, if you like My Hero, I'm glad you do. I think Gojo's better. But a character like he is it Higurama, Maki, Yuta. Like, I don't think there's for 4.5 seasons of My Hero, which is like you know so many more episodes already than even up to the Shibuya incident. Choso, like all those characters for me totally take the cake. Like I think they're so good. And Sukuna, Mahito, Kenjiku, like they're all S tier villains. I think. Maybe Kenjiku's ending people don't like as much, but like that battle of comedy, like no, that it's great and it's S tier stuff. I think. But yeah, I think My Hero like the supporting cast, like I've seen into 5 seasons of it, and I do not remember half of the cast's name of students in class 1A. Um, and in class 1B is even worse, I feel like. And so I feel like because of that, like my Hero's cast a little bit bigger, but I just feel like it's yeah, just not nearly as well rounded or of a story, which is insane to say because it's like not insane, weird to say initially because I know Jujutsu Kaisen is so abrupt in all of the turns that it takes, but I think that just is how Gege storytelling is, and I think it really adheres to that. Revenge of Sukuna and Eren were kind of same. Yeah, it's kind of true. It's kind of funny. Uh, God, love Eren. What a sad little boy. Yeah, do you guys how do we have because it's been a common comparison comparing the end of uh Attack on Titan to Jujutsu Kaisen. What do you guys think of the ending of Attack on Titan? I made a video about it. I have a video on the channel that is reacting to the final chapter, literally as it came out. So like, I liked many parts of the ending. I liked Eren and Armin's conversation. It similarly had issues of mistranslation and when it came out, like there were a couple of lines that just like got quoted to death, even though it was not exactly how the ending was. Um, what do you feel about Jujutsu Kaisen's ending? Everyone really hates it, apparently. So I didn't hate it. I don't think it's a 10 out of 10 ending. I think it's a 7 out of 10 ending for a 9 out of 10 story. And for me, that puts it at like an 8.5 out of 10. The final chapter, I think, is really good. I think I love the conclusion of Sukuna. I love the conclusion of Gojo. I think Yuji's good. The return of Nobara, I don't think was executed as well. Like I would have liked a little more meat there. And same with Megumi getting a little bit more. Like the stuff we get is good. It's just I think how a lot of people feel. Want would just want more, right? Like, and so that's how I feel about that. I really like the final fun mission. I think it's a really good thought for Gege. He wanted to take it back to the original trio, and them kind of having a good time on this kind of like funny last mission, to start the final chapter. I thought that was good. I definitely see the intent behind it. But I definitely think, so you know, I wish it was longer. I think a lot of us do. But to act like it ruins the story or anything is just absolutely insane. But that's just like, same thing with Attack on Titan. And Attack on Titan, it's like you can see the themes there. You could see the ideas being executed and this idea of the cycle of violence being continued. And here it's how Sukuna was changed after losing in the same way that Gojo was, and all of this stuff is really good. So yeah, I think also it's just easy to get wrapped up in little details. Too many people turn stories into checklists. I think, it sucks when you have a character you like that maybe doesn't get touched upon in the way you exactly wanted it to. That's one of the great parts about Haikyuu's ending is that it does touch on every character. Every character gets a moment, and I think fans really appreciated that. But it's not a requirement for stories to touch upon things in very specific ways. But it can be frustrating when you've been waiting for something to happen and you're so certain it will, and then a character doesn't get touched on. But overall, I think the ending's very solid. Uh, who carries Gojo's Will, Yuta, or Yuji? I think Yuta probably does. I mean, I know Yuji gets that moment with Gojo, and Gojo believes in him. It's so good. But I think Yuta maybe more takes on that role. Yuta just seems a little more responsible, a little smarter, you know? And so I think that kind of, in terms of really trying to develop a better system, like Mad Buck was talking about, like we can kind of theorize how the world might change. I think Yuta will be a pioneer. Um, I would imagine so. Would I like to see it? Of course, but I don't think it's a requirement, for the story. So that would be my guess. But I don't know if there's other evidence more for Yuji. Like obviously they both will be, but I imagine Yuta kind of leans more to that. By the way, Sukuna is 11 feet, like insane. Uh, very like One Piece feeling of like how the characters are insanely tall and just like freaks and just so good. Like makes me think about Daniel Green talked about this with the casting of One Piece of just like how big these characters were. It's like they're not even humans in One Piece, and it's like kind of a similar vibe there, but it's so awesome. Anyone else got some Jujutsu Kaisen hot takes? Any more comparisons? Like I feel like for me, in terms of shonen battle, manga and anime, if we're kind of combining both, like my top two are without a doubt Hunter x Hunter and One Piece. Um, but I think Jujutsu Kaisen's in that next tier for me. I grew up Naruto and I love Naruto. I'll always love Naruto. And I think it and Jujutsu Kaisen are probably on a similar playing field. Like I have some issues with both of them and I love things about both of them. Um, it's hard to rank Naruto for me because it is the one. Um, I prefer Jujutsu Kaisen over Yu Yu Hakusho. I actually cite Yu Yu Hakusho as my first anime. It's either that or Dragon Ball or Inuyasha, one of those three. Um, but I much prefer it to My Hero and Black Clover, and Demon Slayer, like of its generation. If we, yeah, Chainsaw Man did just pop in my head. It's close. I think for me, it was closer than I ever thought it would be. Uh, uh, for Chainsaw Man, because I actually caught up to Chainsaw Man well before I read the Shibuya incident or anything, and I was like, I mean, I love part one of Chainsaw, and Jujutsu Kaisen's made it close for sure. But I don't like Sukuna's defeat because Sukuna had two purples, like 12, like 15 black flashes. Domain hits hard. So how does one black? I think it's just the accumulation of everything is just kind of how I've read it. Um, to be honest, I think comparing characters is unfair when you see the endings of one, not the other. Taking All Might as a character from start to finish clears Gojo, who really falls off. Um, I mean, yeah, it's certainly like I haven't finished My Hero. Like I don't want to, I can't claim things based off of how much I've seen. I don't think Gojo's character falls off. I've talked about that a little bit here because I think his ending is so good, in terms of him believing in other people and that his strength is through developing the next generation of people, and that's how he beats Sukuna versus having all of his strength be internal. And I think him dying is a really, really important moment. But I mean, I was probably a little harsh on All Might. I enjoy All Might's character. I also haven't seen it. I know Endeavor people love. I'm kind of in the middle of his kind of development. So yeah, certainly I haven't seen everything. So like, you can kind of throw by My Hero takes aside, especially if you've read the whole story. It's just up until the first 5 seasons. Like for me, it's not really close in terms of how much I like Jujutsu Kaisen more, especially if you're just comparing through the Shibuya incident. Like if you're just thinking of what's out in the anime from what I've seen, I really just fell off of My Hero pretty hard, but I hope my love of it comes back because there was a time where I was like, this is incredible. It didn't quite grip me in the same way that Jujutsu Kaisen did, but also Jujutsu Kaisen's more of my kind of story, I think, in terms of uh, the insane twists that it takes. Reminds me, I also mentioned this comparison, reminds me a lot of Red Rising, a phenomenal book series of just like sometimes when you're reading it, it feels like the story could go in an infinite number of directions, and that's what happens in Shibuya. Happens a lot through the Culling games, and at times through Shinjuku, and I love that part of it. But yeah, I mean, My Hero has good stuff going for it. Like I'm not of the group that says My Hero's the worst story ever made or like the worst shonen ever made. I prefer it over Black Clover, I think. In terms of that ranking when we're kind of going back to that discussion. But for me, I did fall off of it, and in trying to get back on it a little bit this summer, I just haven't found the passion for it. But I will see it through because like it was such a important stream or important show to get me kind of back reinvigorated into the genre. Great stream, much appreciated. Glad you're hanging out. It's good to see you. Is it Okabe? That is how I'm pronouncing it. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. As you all know, like my pronunciations can be a little all over the place. Sukuna's usually going to be next Sukuna. That would be an insane twist, I think. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we do get a part two. I know a lot of people are hoping we do. And I would be, down for it if we did. Oh, perfect timing. Do you think there will be a sequel, or would you prefer the story as is? Honestly, I prefer whatever Gege decides. I'm all for. I want him to be healthy. I want him to be working on a schedule that's good for him. If he, is wants to continue the story and thinks there's story there to tell that he's interested in, then I'm all for it. And if he's not, then I'm not too upset with what we got. Like, yeah, I would have liked a little bit more on some of the characters, but I don't think it's as abrupt. Or I don't think it leaves as much open as other people do. But that's just kind of my thinking on it. Like, I am pretty satisfied with the ending. I think the last chapter is phenomenal. And I don't think the ending to Sukuna is that bad, especially on reread when you kind of get it all as a packaged deal. I don't think it's too abrupt. I think initially a lot of people in how it skips after the fight to, Megumi waking up. I think the pacing of that, especially in weekly, was really tough for people because it didn't feel like there was a great fallout. Like it's like a huge thing that we finally beat Sukuna, and then it's kind of like you just cut past it. But then we kind of revisit things a little after that. So I think when you get that kind of context, it makes the feeling to that encounter a little more grand, because I think that was kind of the crux of why people were frustrated, was it didn't feel as grand as maybe it should have. And maybe that's a flaw in Gege, that he should have taken a chapter initially to really go over the fallout of Sukuna, but that kind of comes like 2 chapters later. But yeah, overall, if we don't get any more, I will be satisfied. I will read the story and I think find a lot of nuance in the story for a long time to come. But yeah, in kind of for me, it's kind of in that second tier of long running shonen battle series. And I know that, we're talking demographics here, like genre demographic kind of mixed together. But it's not a Hunter x Hunter or One Piece for me. I do think it's in the ballpark of Naruto. I'd have to wait a little longer before I definitively said I liked it more than Naruto, because Naruto is such a nostalgic series for me. Then I definitely think I think it's a little bit better than Yu Yu Hakusho. I think it's a little bit better than a couple of these other series. So it's kind of right in that second tier for me. If I made a JJK ending theory, Sukuna somehow eats his last finger, then Sukuna thinks, what am I going to do with these brats? So he releases the merger to fight someone stronger than Sukuna. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's a good theory. I think it's similar to how a lot of people wanted the ending to be, right? Like, this is a little bit of Gege's own fault, because he so consistently is just like, starting in Shibuya, people just fall off and they die, and the worst thing happens in a lot of circumstances, and then Gojo dies, and right, and it's like all of this stuff. It's like the despair just keeps happening. Um, and so it makes sense that a lot of people wanted the merger to happen because it felt like that was, the next step of the story. Um, and so I can see why people are frustrated with the merger not happening. Um, but like if it played out and it was like, okay, the merger happens and then we reverse it instantly, like it, I don't think it's a huge miss that the merger didn't happen. Um, the only way the merger could have been done well is if he had another 50 chapters to go. So maybe the story would have been better off. I don't know. Um, maybe it could have been elevated to a new height. Like obviously, I don't think it's a perfect story, but I think with the amount of time that Gege and the staff at Jump ended up concluding with, I think it makes sense that the merger didn't happen. By the way, just to put everyone's notice, the mangaka and animators sacrifice a lot for their story, so we should be patient with any release or schedule as health comes first. Yeah, totally agree. I hope if Gege makes a sequel, I hope it's not for like a couple of years. Like I want him to take time off. The staff need to take time off, and same with the animators. Like we know how brutal a lot of the conditions have been at Mappa. And so I totally agree. Like I don't think health definitely comes first, and also if the healthier you are, right, like the story's gonna be better, and I'll wait. And it's nothing new to, if you've read Game of Thrones, how long, 14 years or whatever, 13 years since the last Game of Thrones book. And I'm very much of the mindset of, you know, we don't deserve more of the story just because we've read up until this point. We're not entitled to it, you know? Um, and so for Jujutsu Kaisen, I don't think we're entitled to a part two, even if we really want one, even if it feels like one has been hinted at. Because I do think there's a lot that could be explored. True, in the end, sometimes we just connect with characters and stories more than others. I find My Hero more appealing than Jujutsu Kaisen. Its messages just vibe with me, while Jujutsu Kaisen fell flat in the end, in my opinion. I think that's very fair. And I don't know. I mean, I've gotten spoiled a little bit on My Hero's endings. Like I, want to be topical, and I'll, have contacts that I work with when I'm making shorts and with the committee and everything. And so I know like a few kind of things about the ending, but yeah, I think that's totally true. Like there's a lot of competent stuff going on in My Hero, even from the stuff that I didn't vibe with as well. Um, I remember having some conversations or just seeing like a lot of tweets from Shonen OG, who I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched as well. When My Hero season 4 or 5 was airing, whenever the Gentleman arc was, which really didn't not land with me, but he really, really loves. And, like there's going to be competent stuff, and it's all about personal preference. And often that's good. It means the story's being more specific. And I think that's a really good thing. And then that comes up with Gege as well. Like it's such a specific tone for Jujutsu Kaisen, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I've definitely just connected a lot more with Jujutsu Kaisen than My Hero. Especially, My Hero's from season 3.5 through onward to what I've seen in season 5, I just didn't connect with the same way. And if you wanted Yuji's part, Sukuna thinks what Kenjiku did was this brat, and he wants to switch because he is badly injured, and Yuji also wants to defeat the merger, and they switch. It'd be kind of interesting. Like there's a lot of interesting stuff that could have happened if like Gege does have this ability to just like make powers come out of nowhere, and like things really switch up. So that is really true, I think, in terms of like how many directions the end of the story could have gone. And one thing I do really love about the ending, though, I do really love the last mission our trio goes on. I just think it's a really nice way to end the story, and I think it does pay off Nobara coming back a little bit, to have like happiness, and I think was a decent way to take it. I definitely do not think this is Gege's Yu Yu Hakusho per se. Not that not that he won't release or couldn't release a new better manga, right? Like Tagashi released Hunter x Hunter, and it's just I think just straight up better in a lot of facets than Yu Yu Hakusho. Yu Yu Hakusho is good though. Like I feel like I've been kind of ragging on it. Like it's a great time. Um, but I don't necessarily think it is quite the same thing for Gege, but it could happen that he comes out with something that's even better. Do you think that Yuji will beat Sukuna? I think all of them already did beat Sukuna, you know? Like, I think that's the whole thing. But I don't, if we're talking in terms of raw power scaling, in terms of if it was perfect conditions and characters were fighting one on one, like I still think Sukuna's slightly stronger than Gojo, but Gojo's philosophy is more valuable than Sukuna's, and that's why Gojo wins in the end. And I'm so glad that was like kind of made explicit, or Sukuna admitting that he lost in the final chapter. I think really, really important for that kind of reading of the story that I've been on for a long time. And I don't know, would you guys be interested in me making a video on Gojo didn't lose? I'm thinking about that. Maybe writing that this week would be kind of my offering again for post the final chapter being out. And I hope you guys liked the video on Jujutsu Kaisen's legacy and how I think the one thing that Gege does arguably better than any other author I've read is storytelling through action. He's so good at it. A great example in the Shinjuku Showdown is Kenjiku's fight. You see it all over Shibuya, and the Culling Games is also arguably the peak of storytelling through action in terms of thematic weight to the characters. Because arguably the best fight in the series is somehow, I think it's Gojo versus Sukuna, but maybe a close second is Yuji versus Higurama. I think that fight's insane. I find the ending so anticlimactic. Yeah, and I think that does come from how the battle ends. It's like Nobara comes back, it ends, and then we just cut away, and then it's like another chapter when it comes back. So I definitely could see how those feelings come up. I personally didn't feel that way as much, but with how insane so much of the story is, I don't think it's unreasonable for a lot of fans to be like, we thought the merger would happen, we thought there would be another twist, and there wasn't. But I do think looking at what we got and really reflecting on it, that there's a lot that's really connected to the story and makes a lot of sense, especially with Sukuna's relationship with Yuji and Gojo. Gojo's powers are so simple and elegant, and Sukuna power system is monstrous and complicated. LOL. Very true. Yeah, like, that's like the biggest like barrier for Jujutsu Kaisen sometimes. It's like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about right now when they're going through power systems. Like, sometimes it feels very inaccessible to understand all the nuances of it. I feel like I still don't. Like, I read the story many times, certain sections of the story, for my Yuta video, like I'm reading all of Yuta's stuff over and over again. I still feel like there's things I don't fully understand, about the power systems or how powers function. For all the hype, I still don't understand Yuji's domain. Yeah, his domain's really interesting, because you don't get a lot of explanation of it. And he kind of says, if I'm not mistaken, like, I don't really know what's going on. Like, this just kind of happened in the heat of the battle. When I was working on my video for the Jujutsu Kaisen's legacy and was reread that fight between him and Hiragumi, did I pronounce that right? Higurama, I think. Man, some of the Haikyuu names they're like melding with Jujutsu Kaisen names. But I think there is actually a little bit of foreshadowing there that Yuji's domain won't be focused on one hit kill, because Higurama's domain is not, and Yuji has this whole moment where he's like, oh yeah, this is how domains were for a long time before it became this only purpose being action. And I think it's really fitting that his domain, like, we don't get a lot of explanation necessarily on the name of his domain that like people wanted to see, but the fact that his domain is just involving a conversation and involving a look, I read it as kind of a look into a person's past, and the fact that Yuji, there's really the subtle moment of Yuji kind of saying you could have gone down multiple paths, makes it seem like maybe Yuji has some insight into Sukuna's past, right? And so that's kind of how I've read the domain is of Yuji going through his past and this kind of way of communication with someone. And I think it's really cool that his domain isn't this death battle one hit KO in the same way that Higurama's isn't. And I think it's foreshadowed actually in the Calling games and in that battle that's maybe where Yuji's domain will go. So I think in terms of what his domain is, I think it's really great. I do agree that um, maybe his domain it would have been nice to get a little more information about it just because the power system is really interesting and learning about domains, how they manifest is a really satisfying part of the series. And so I do agree with that take. Um, I think all the complaints will be fixed in the anime's ending, just like Attack on Titan, and everyone will love it then. I'm calling it. I do think more people will like it when the anime ends, and I think it often comes down to pacing. And Attack on Titan is a very good example, and something that I cited in my video about how Attack on Titan fixed the manga's ending. And so my kind of thinking or theory on that is when the second to last chapter was it like 138? Is that how many chapters were for Attack on Titan? I think, or 139 total, but the second to last um, ends with like everyone dying, and then it ends with Mikasa holding Aaron's head. And when this is done in a movie, um, everyone for a month who read it was like, "Oh my gosh, Gabby, Jean, Connie, all of them are dead. Um, this is devastating," right? And it was a lot of coping with that devastation, in a way that like Jujutsu Kaisen fans kind of wanted. They've been taught to want the pain. I think from Gege, and that's led to some people being frustrated with it. But in Attack on Titan, when the final chapter came out, a huge frustration was around a lot of them coming back immediately, and everyone said, "Well, that moment lost all of its impact." But then when you talk to anime onlys, it just doesn't matter because it's all within the flow of the final movie there. And so that cliffhanger ending in a manga, especially when it's released monthly, is really, really annoying when you walk that back. When it's 10 minutes or 5 minutes of content, you know, in a film or in a show, that it doesn't feel like that. Like that's not necessarily an issue. And I think that's one really specific reason. I think with Attack on Titan's ending being better regarded and just like better working in an anime, or honestly, if you were to read both chapters back to back, I think a little bit of that will happen. We talked about with how the frustration at the ending, feeling a little anticlimactic. I think the anime might be able to better handle that. And so I do think you're right. Like sometimes it's just longer form content. You get to see the full kind of picture of what's going on, and it's really hard when you have 20 pages every week. Um, but there's some really great things about that because you really get to sit with the details of the story, and it shouldn't be disregarded that you're overanalyzing elements of the story. Like that's a really great thing, I think. But it can lead to kind of overreacting and just not waiting for the bigger picture. But on the other hand, it encourages weekly readers to really look into the details of the story. I think I've kind of brought up like, oh, the weekly reading has this like issue of everyone hating the ending, but it also allows people to really really understand the story on a really great level that turns everyone into really active readers who are theorizing. I think that's really great about it. It just can lead to some of this kind of negativeness, I think, towards when certain things don't go the way we expect them to. App Prime, good to see you. Shout out to you. What's up? How are you doing on this Sunday afternoon? I'll probably only be streaming for another 15-20 minutes maybe. I'm going to try to watch some football coming up. My Packers are playing the Vikings, and so I'll have to tune into that. But if people are still chatting, we'll chat up until as long as I can go. But good to see you, App. Thanks for the comment on the Jujutsu Kaisen legacy video and kind of what was what was your thought on the ending? Now, did you get to read a chance to read the last chapter, and what do you think about it? Also, everyone should check out The Wild Robot, if you haven't. The new DreamWorks film, really Ghibli inspired, specifically Castle in the Sky. I saw it, a couple days ago, and I thought it was really good. It has some issues with the story. It doesn't get quite as cerebral as I wanted it to, but beautiful animation. And I think any fan, especially if you're a fan of Studio Ghibli and have seen Castle in the Sky, a lot of really cool stuff going on there. DreamWorks has really knocked it out of the park the last couple of years with their animation. Where's Sukuna's Minecraft Trident? I do not know. Maybe you know. Um, I did it, and I think it made it make sense. Yeah. Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I think the last chapter for a lot of people. I mean, I think it really brought a lot of people back. It's a little bit different than Attack on Titans when it released, and I think a lot of the hate was unfair, but the last chapter people had just like liked it less. Versus a lot of people didn't like the previous chapters, but this one, I think has a lot of great stuff. The Sukuna bringing Mahito back, like so good. Mahito really, really hits for me. And his dichotomy with Sukuna there at the end is really interesting. Um, like curse techniques and the whole system is beautiful. Reminds me of Nen, but the constant additions, omissions, exploration make it so hard to follow through. Yeah, I think it's a perfect explanation of it. Like it does remind me a lot of Nen. It does a lot of cool things. It feels like it's limitless, but also has specific rules, and it's a great thing. Um, and but yeah, it is. Nen is somehow a little bit easier to follow when it comes up, like Tagashi does. I mean, you get lost in his rule sets for sure, but he does a little bit of a better job, I think, of bracketing or like chunking complexity a little bit of his power systems in a way that Gege just is kind of like throwing it at you a little bit more insanely. Um, but it's also a bit easier, I think, in Jujutsu Kaisen to, if you're not getting it, to just accept it and move on. Like I don't think you have to fully comprehend all of the intricacies, or even many of the intricacies of the power system to get the emotion and the feeling of the conflicts in a way that Hunter x Hunter you kind of do have to. If you're not grapping the complexities of the power system, you're not going to understand the fight in as good of a way. Where Gege, it might be a little more confusing to understand them, but you don't necessarily need to get the feeling of them. What's your guys' favorite power systems? I think Hunter x Hunter, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, um, and are up there for manga. Again, I mentioned him earlier, but because I've been reading so much Brando Sando, obviously his power systems are phenomenal. And anyone who likes power systems and likes Hunter x Hunter should be reading him. I mean, Sukuna had a trident in his hand in the flashbacks and cover art. Yeah, I mean, it would have been. I'm kind of remembering now what you were talking about. Yeah, I mean, it would have been cool. It would have been cool to see him with a trident, like just like badass shit, what we want to see from Gege. Last mention, LOL. I think My Hero really picks up at the end of season 5. I have heard that, and I feel like that's why I started watching it again. And I kind of was looking up stuff. People are like the beginning of season 5 is maybe a bit slow, but it kind of gets back to it. So that is my intention to catching up. It completely changes tone, which JJK does much sooner. Gege really does great things. I think his work with Yuji was fantastic for sure. Yeah, totally agree with that. And I will slowly be working through My Hero, because I do want to finish that story. So as I'm watching it, as we're streaming, like if I watch a couple more episodes, I'll bring it up on streams and things like that. But yeah, I mean, you're making me want to continue it, right? Like anyone who really loves a story, it's infectious, right? It's like Hinata's hunger. Um, and I like the panel with Sukuna walking away with Urame. Made me feel, damn, we've come a long way since chapter 1. Yeah, I mean, that's the moment. I think if you guys watch Radman, he was streaming the other day and I was watching it, and he mentioned, he was like, I just need this last chapter to make me feel things. Um, and that moment is one of the moments in the last chapter where you're like, oh, I love this story. And I do think maybe that's the thing that the other couple chapters are missing, where it's like you're really trying to interact with the subtlety, um, of of the story, and kind of being like, well, what's Gege cooking up here? You don't need to do that in the final chapter. I think it's a big reason why it hit for so many people, including me. Um, it is the best chapter out of these last five. Um, can you do a tier list when you're free? A tier list of what? But yeah, I love doing tier lists. I did do a character one for Jujutsu Kaisen. I thought about maybe doing an arc tier list, like I did with One Piece, but I feel like there's not quite as many arcs broken up. Like I think it's just two. It's like, okay, we'll be debating Shibuya versus Shinjuku. Um, uh, and then that's it. Uh, you know, uh, FMBD, is that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood? Yeah, it is my favorite. Like a character tier list, that would be really fun. Character tier list of Full Metal. Um, my the first video on my channel that got like 1,000 views was a video actually on, and maybe some of you have seen it. If you follow the channel for a while, is uh, on why I love the 2003 version of Full Metal. I do think Brotherhood's better, but I think 2003 is really good too. That would be fun. I've been thinking of rewatching Full Metal and making a full video on it. There's so many. I'm worried it won't quite get as many views as I would want it to for a project that big. Because I would really want to do that story justice. I made a couple of smaller videos. But yeah, I really think, I would love to talk Full Metal. So yeah, it would be fun to do a tier list. Hopefully we'd get enough people to hop in. It's always like, my channel does so good with Haikyuu, that I'm always trying to kind of balance not overdoing Haikyuu content. But that's what people show up for, right? But if I thought people would hang out for Full Metal, like I'd love to chat Full Metal. Because I think it's just like the greatest thing ever made. And honestly, Haikyuu is probably the closest to it. Haikyuu is probably the first thing that I've really watched where I'm like, this could challenge Full Metal as my favorite anime manga of all time. And that's pretty spectacular for Haikyuu. Haikyuu also has the fact that it has really been the thing that has raised my channel up to something that no one was watching, to people, watching my videos a lot. And so I feel like it has an extra, Haikyuu has that extra bit to it, where Full Metal has, a little nostalgia, of course. They're along the lines of like a Game of Thrones and Dune as like my favorite things ever, for sure. To be honest, leaks really screw up how manga can be perceived. I totally agree with this. People just jump to conclusions and want to drag shit for attention. I don't like the ending, but it ain't garbage like some are saying. It's a really great take, I think. And especially a story, this is another Radman thing from a couple chapters ago, but Jujutsu Kaisen has a lot of subtlety to it, or there's a lot of different ways to interpret it. And that's like my favorite thing ever, is interpreting stuff. Like, I majored in English literature for a reason. I like the idea that every story has theoretically an infinite number of readings into it. And I think Jujutsu Kaisen really lends itself well to really, really interesting readings. And there's a lot of different textual evidence for, a lot of different ideas in the story. And so when you're just saying like this ending's shit because of it, because I've seen these 3 panels that I don't even know what they're saying, or I have really shitty translations of it and I have no context for it, is insane. And it sucks that like I didn't engage with a lot, because I wasn't actually caught up to Jujutsu Kaisen for a long time, so I haven't been fully engaged with leak culture for the whole time. But it sucks that you have to engage with it a little bit, and it also should be put upon creators. Like, at the very least, you should be waiting till the full chapter is out and scanned. Like, even if that comes out early, I've definitely got caught up in that, of on the Friday when there's initial translations released, like not being able to wait and like wanting to talk about it. But if you're like only talking about the leaks, creators should be held accountable too, right? Like, um, I'm fairly certain a couple, I don't want to name because I don't fully know, but there's a couple of really big creators who are kind of dragging the ending based on leaks for clicks, and that sucks because you're totally missing all nuance of the story, and you're just like really just outing yourself as a lack of uh, liter media literacy, honestly. If you're dragging a story based on leaks, and also like, remember when people were comparing? I tweeted about this. I saw people comparing it to the season 8 of Game of Thrones. Like, for context, if Jujutsu Kaisen's ending was like the end of Game of Thrones, and I kind of threw this out, Yuji, after his conversation with Sukuna, like, imagine this is the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. Yuji decides, hey, Sukuna, we had this conversation. I actually think you're right. I'm going to start murdering humans because fuck them for no reason. And or the end of the fight isn't with Yuji winning, but Hikari is like, I'm actually gonna stop fighting you, Urame, and I'm gonna beat Sukuna in one hit. Um, those kinds of things, if that's what Gege did, that would be the ending of that would be on the level of how bad the ending of Game of Thrones was. So anyways, rant over. I know probably some of you haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I have a big stake in, it's like one of my favorite, the books are some of my favorite things ever. Um, and when people were making that comparison, it was just driving me up a wall because I'm like, literally every character would have to fundamentally betray who they are, um, to make it on the level of Game of Thrones and how bad it is. What are your thoughts on Alaya hides her feelings in Russia? I do not have a ton of thoughts. I feel like I'm not sure what you're referencing there, but maybe I should know. So you can elaborate more if I should know, like with the acronym earlier. Uh, the Ancient Language of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Poloni. Oh, you know what's crazy? Christopher Poloni, and Necromancer, um, Christopher Poloni, because he wrote, that's Aragorn, isn't it, or Aragon? Did I just like mix Lord of the Rings in there? He's from either from or lives in Bozeman, Montana, which is where I was born and where I went to college. Um, and so I would like, I actually didn't read the book growing up, but I had a copy of it, and it was like a little above my reading grade when I was really little. Um, but yeah, very cool. I'm a little behind on the chat, but yeah, he's from Montana, which is where I'm from. For all of you, middle of nowhere, basically. Uh, have you done a Jujutsu Kaisen arc tier yet? I haven't, just because I felt like it was a little too straight up, but I think I would go 1, Shinjuku Showdown, 2, Shibuya, 3, Calling Games, 4, Hidden Inventory as the kind of the top 4, and then probably Maki's or Perfect Preparation would be next. And then maybe like the Junpei Mahito arc, death paintings, it kind of all in there. But I kind of view Perfect Preparation as part of the Calling Games, honestly. Um, is Titan considered a power system? It's really interesting to me with history as such deep Lovecraftian themes. Oh yeah, I had you guys shout out power systems, and then I went like ranting for like 10 minutes. Yeah, yeah, Necromancer is really interesting. And I want to read that. Um, and then Titan, I don't know if it's necessarily straight up power system, but it is really, really fascinating, I think, for sure. And I love the thing they done with Gojo. He died. Yeah, Gojo I thought was great. I'm surprised people have dragged him so much. Like, it can be uh frustrating to not have him in the narrative, but I think there's a lot of purpose behind Gojo's character's direction. What kind of editing do you like to have in your videos? Um, I try to go for there's I can point to specific creators that have obviously inspired me. And I feel like I've pioneered a little bit of my own style in terms of my video essays. I think the best creator on YouTube is the Nerd Writer. And so if anyone has watched a lot of the Nerdwriter, you can definitely see his influence on my work. Um, I can't I am not my videos personally, I feel like are not 10% as good as his, in terms of fundamentally conveying a subject really, really efficiently, and his editing is off the charts. Obviously, Super Eye Patch Wolf has a ton of influence to me, um, and I really like the atmospheric elements in his videos, and I feel like I'm trying. Or my initial intent, especially when I first was making video essays, now it's just like I'm just going off of vibes. Um, and I feel pretty confident in how I'm editing, and I need to be, I'm always looking to improve my editing for sure. But I think kind of the precision that the Nerdwriter has. I think if you watch a lot of video essays, if you've never seen a Nerdwriter video essay, sometimes his people can argue that his lack depth because he's definitely trying to do inner or kind of just overview introductory ideas a lot of the time. But the precision that he has in like 7 minutes takes you on a journey that most 30-minute video essays do. So that's always what I'm trying to do and with editing, but I do like having this atmospheric emotional bend to it that I think Eye Patch Wolf does so well. And he obviously is a huge inspiration for a lot of us, I think, who are creating videos. Currently, I mean, in terms of editing, Radmin is incredible. Super inspiring, and his work with Johnny Star, and Johnny Star's videos are, you know, I think specifically his editing is so good. In terms of writing, it's always the Nerdwriter. I'm always trying to catch up to him, and I spend a lot more time on my scripts um, than I do on the editing process. I, majored in English. Writing is everything for me. I actually am hopefully one day, I've been writing a novel for a very long time, for a couple years now, and I'm getting close to maybe sending it out to agents and things, because I really want to write a fantasy novel that is for anime fans, like very anime inspired, and can maybe be a bridge to getting more manga readers into fantasy. And that's something I'd like to talk about more on the channel, just or like on streams like this of my personal fiction writing. But so that's kind of a long-winded answer on editing, but it's kind of vibes at this point. I feel like people were too hard on Megumi. I don't think his character should follow the same arc. I agree, people are a little too hard. I think chapter 266 is a great moment for him. I love the thing. Did I read this one already? When he died fighting Sukuna, and when he did, yeah, that's a great moment. Yeah, I think it's so good. Like there's some really great stuff in these final chapters, I think. Have you thought of doing Haikyuu duo tier lists? I really love the character list. Yeah, that would be really interesting. I also want to do a Haikyuu. I want to draft an all-star team with chat. And I need to plan it a little bit more because I want to give people ample time. But I want to see if me, chat, let's draft a team, and then let's talk about who's better. I think that'd be really fun. But I need to do a little more prep before I do that. Yep, and that was about my Bozeman fantasy author. Yeah, very good. Do I not like Goodwill? I'm not sure who is Goodwill. Maybe is that like a book, or is that an author? Can Yuji become as powerful as Sukuna and intelligent? I don't think so. Intelligent, maybe. I mean, Yuji's kind of dumb though. I don't think as powerful. Most of the hate is honestly unwarranted. Like, you literally have people thanking a leaker. Yeah, the thanks to leakers, insane. I totally agree. And yeah, I don't think it's quite as bad. Yeah, I do think maybe that's where a lot of the discourse around this has come, where the hate is Goodwill is in Goodwill event arc. Yeah, because that's earlier on. It's not quite. I think season 1 is just overall everything in season 1 is weaker than almost everything that comes after it. Personally, so yeah, that's my kind of thinking on that. Shiny. But yeah, I kind of agree that people did want a 10 out of 10 ending, and when it's not, it makes sense that people will be frustrated. Have you thought about talking about Persona games? I've actually never played them. I'm a much more, I've realized this more recently. I'm a very big TCG player. I know someone, if you're in the chat and you had suggested me to check out Flesh and Blood, I did yesterday. I just picked up a couple of starter decks and kind of learned how to play. Really fun. But I never get through video games as much as I want to, but I've always heard that I love Persona. So I've never played them, but I feel like I should. Your videos are amazing. Really appreciate it. Um, you like cinematic editing. Yeah, definitely. I also was in film school actually for a little bit. So definitely. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, that's kind of just kind of where the editing has gone. Um, you're the best any tuber I watch. Well, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's really cool to see people who really enjoy my videos. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. Like I watch other creators. I'm like, oh my god, their work is so much better than mine. Um, so comments like this really help with like imposter syndrome and things like that. That I feel like I definitely get frequently. It's kind of the cycle of editing videos where I'm like in the middle of an edit and I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. Everyone's gonna hate this, and then when I publish it, I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I agree. People are just pushing 3-page leaks for clicks, and it's just crappy. I wish that kind of culture would just end. It's so toxic. Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah, leaks suck. So much. A fantasy novel, I'll be waiting. Yes. I've thought about for a long time maybe releasing chapters. Um, to the audience because I do it's a story that is really hard. I think like I maybe took on a lot more than I could chew. It's a fantasy book that's supposed to be kind of shonen battle inspired, but also traditional fantasy inspired. That takes on like 5 point of views. Um, and so yeah, I thought maybe I'd throw up a couple of chapters to kind of get people's thoughts. So yeah, maybe I'll give some more updates on how that's been going. I feel like it would be kind of fun to do the beginning of some of these streams of being like, hey, this is where I'm at with a lot of different projects. And that's one of them that I don't get to talk about that much, but is something that I've put in a ton of work on the past couple years, and really, really, really hope to at least one day self-publish it, but I really want to try to do traditional publishing on it. Um, and so yeah, if you guys are interested, let me know, and I'd love to maybe share a chapter or two of it to get some feedback. Um, have you heard of The Cradle? It kind of has the anime feel for progressive fantasy fans and inspired by traditional web novels. I've not heard of that, but I will definitely check it out. It seems like it'd be interesting. And there's a couple things like I'm reading Yumi in the Nightmare Painter right now, which is definitely has a lot of anime overtones, and it's really, really great. And it's fun to see Sanderson reach out in that way. Another stream I want to do is uh book because I read a ton of novels and I read a ton of manga, and doing anime and manga recommendations for books. So like, a clear one, if you watch my last Jujutsu Kaisen video, if you like Jujutsu Kaisen, you should check out Red Rising for these reasons. And I have a lot of comparisons like that I think would be kind of a fun stream to do. Um, so yeah, that could happen definitely down the road. Goodwill isn't goodwill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's good, but I do think um, the later arcs in Jujutsu Kaisen are just like all superior to the content early on. I got very behind on the chat there, but we caught up. I'm probably gonna head out in just a couple minutes here to go watch some football. But if you guys have any other thoughts before we wrap up this stream, let me know. But overall, I thought the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen was decent. I think it's way overhated. I think leak culture is a big thing into that. People really want clicks. People are hyping it up as it's the worst thing ever, and that's just desperately not the case. Um, but I do think there maybe was it does feel a little rushed, but like a little rushed is very different than ruining the entire story. There's so much depth to Jujutsu Kaisen. I will not be done making videos on Jujutsu Kaisen at all. I might make a video on why Gojo didn't lose. I think that would be fun, and hopefully could get um, a lot of views. I think it would be really good. Um, uh, Shonen Battle Fantasy, 5 point of views, man, you should start giving us some chapters or a name. Yeah, well, it's crazy is I don't have a name for it because I've been tossing around a ton of names. I always am like, I hate this. But yeah, maybe I'll put up some chapters. and that would be fun to discuss on like a stream and what everyone thinks about it. So yeah, I really appreciate the kind of support and people seeming kind of hyped about it. Uh, and Red Rising, yeah, it is amazing. Although I'm kind of in the minority. I didn't love Dark Age, and I have not read Lightbringer yet because I didn't love Dark Age, even though everyone does. And I really love Iron Gold, which is book 4 of that series, and then book 5 is like, you know, I think Golden Sun's the best, which I talked about in the video, which is book 2. But yeah, Red Rising's still phenomenal, even if I didn't love book 5 as much. But yeah, this is a really great stream. There more people hopped in here. Anytime I'm not talking Haikyuu, I'm worried no one's going to show up. So I really appreciate everyone hanging out with me for like a good hour and a half. Just chatting with y'all. Streaming's been really fun. I might do a stream later this week, so be on the. I'll probably post if I do. I have the typical like Saturday, Sunday morning streams, but I really have enjoyed streaming, and so I want to do one on talking about the upcoming season because it looks insane for this upcoming anime season, and I need to do it this week if I want to talk about shows and then start to check some of them out. If there was a part 2, what would you want to see? Would you still want to follow the trio, or would you prefer different characters or even a time skip? Definitely think a time skip would be awesome. I would say do it straight up like Shippuden. Time skip, same characters. Although it would be weird. Gojo will leave a void if that's done that I don't think enough people are talking about. Like, people are already frustrated with how he came out of the narrative. And so I do think he would leave a little bit of a void, but yeah, I'd love that. Really, it's all about JJ keeping the insanity up is what I'm interested in. We need a Sukuna backstory volume or a book. Yeah, I am part of the crowd that doesn't think we need too much on him, but if we get stuff, like, I'm sure it'll be great. All right, everyone. This is it for me for this stream. Again, shout out to everyone who's hanging out. Overall, Jujutsu Kaisen, I'm giving the series on the day of the release of the last chapter. It's probably an 8.5 out of 10 for me. But that could change with time. Again, legacy takes time for sure. So I hope you all enjoyed my the stream. Make sure to check out my video on the legacy of Jujutsu Kaisen, and then also the Hoshiumi video is doing really good. So appreciate all the support there. If you want to join, always make sure to check out Patreon if you want to join Discord, chat with me. I think we're going to be watching actually Hellsing Ultimate this month for the buddy watch along, where we just like chat about new episode or an episode in the Discord. So check out Patreon, and that'll be officially announced soon. But I think in voting, Hellsing Ultimate won for spooky season. And then, I'm going to be talking a lot of, like Blue Box, Uzumaki, Dan to Dan, all these shows that are releasing this season for sure. So hopefully another stream in a couple days, maybe a Gojo video on the way. So thanks for the support, and we'll see you all soon.